The call came at 9:07 p.m., shattering the fragile peace of bedtime stories in dinosaur pajamas. Adrian Cole stared at his phone, watching his boss's name flash across the screen like a warning siren. Victoria Hale never called after hours. Never. His hand trembled as he answered, already knowing that whatever came next would change everything. "My entire system is gone." Her voice cracked through the line, stripped of its usual steel. "Everything. The presentation, the contracts, 5 years of data, all of it. I need you here. Now." But Adrian had no babysitter, no backup plan, and a 5-year-old who couldn't sleep without his bedtime routine. What happened that night would unravel every professional boundary he'd ever built. If you want to see where this impossible night leads, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Adrian Cole stood frozen in his narrow kitchen, one hand gripping the phone, the other clutching a well-worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. Through the doorway, he could see Leo sprawled across the living room rug, building what appeared to be a spaceship from couch cushions and blankets. The boy's pajamas were on backward, a battle Adrian had chosen not to fight tonight, and his dark hair stuck up in 3 different directions. "Adrian? Are you there?" Victoria's voice cut through his paralysis, sharp despite the panic threading through it. "Yes, I'm here." He pressed his fingers against his temple, already calculating impossible logistics. "Ms. Hale, I understand this is urgent, but it's Friday night and I don't have anyone who can watch my son. I don't care if you have to bring a circus," Victoria interrupted. "You're the only person who knows my security protocols. The presentation is Monday morning. If I can't access those files, this company loses the Meridian contract, and 300 people lose their jobs, including you." Adrian's jaw tightened, classic Victoria Hale, turning a request into a threat, wrapping desperation in intimidation. He'd worked for Hale Industries for 3 years, fixing servers and troubleshooting networks from his cubicle in the basement IT department. He'd seen Victoria exactly 7 times, always from a distance, always surrounded by executives in expensive suits. She was a legend in the building, brilliant, ruthless, impossible to please. People called her the Ice Queen behind her back, though never loud enough to risk being overheard. And now she was asking him to bring his 5-year-old son to her mansion at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. "Give me 30 minutes, Adrian heard himself say. He ended the call and stood motionless for 3 seconds, wondering if he'd just made a catastrophic mistake. Then Leo's voice pulled him back. "Daddy? Who was that?" Adrian turned to find his son watching him with those wide brown eyes that looked exactly like his mother's. Sarah had died 2 years ago, a brain aneurysm that took her in 90 seconds, leaving Adrian with a 3-year-old and a grief so enormous it had its own gravity. He'd learned to function inside it, learned to pack lunches and sign permission slips and read bedtime stories while his heart stayed permanently broken. But he'd never learned how to explain the world to Leo without Sarah there to help him find the right words. "That was my boss," Adrian said, crouching down to Leo's level. "She has a big computer problem and needs my help tonight." Leo's face fell. "But we're reading about Max and the wild things." "I know, buddy, and we will, but we have to take a little drive first." Adrian reached out to fix Leo's backward pajamas, but stopped himself. "Pick your battles. How would you feel about being my assistant tonight?" The boy's expression shifted from disappointment to cautious interest. "What does an assistant do?" "Very important things, like sitting quietly while I work, and maybe watching movies on my tablet. Think you can handle that?" Leo considered this with the seriousness of someone weighing a major life decision. "Will there be snacks?" "We'll bring the goldfish crackers." "The cheddar ones? Is there any other kind?" Leo grinned, and Adrian felt the familiar ache in his chest. Gratitude and grief tangled together. Every smile was a gift. Every ordinary moment felt stolen from the universe that had taken Sarah. 20 minutes later, they were in Adrian's aging Honda Civic, heading toward the hills where Ridgemont's wealthy residents built their estates behind iron gates and old-growth trees. Leo sat in his booster seat, clutching a worn stuffed giraffe named Jeffrey, humming a song from school. Adrian kept stealing glances at him in the rearview mirror, second-guessing everything. Bringing a kindergartner to a work emergency was unprofessional. Bringing him to Victoria Hale's private residence was borderline insane. But the alternative was telling his boss no and single fathers with unreliable childcare didn't last long in competitive fields. Adrian had learned that lesson 6 months after Sarah died, when he'd missed 2 days for Leo's strep throat and returned to find his project reassigned and his performance review downgraded. The world didn't adjust for grief. It just kept moving, and you either kept up or got left behind. Victoria's address led them up a winding private road lined with maple trees. The houses here weren't just large. They were statements. Architectural declarations of success, each one trying to outdo its neighbors with more glass, more angles, more studied minimalism. Victoria's home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a sprawling mid-century modern structure of wood and stone and floor-to-ceiling windows. Warm light spilled from inside, making the house look almost welcoming. Almost. Adrian pulled into the circular driveway and killed the engine. His hands were sweating. "Is this a castle?" Leo asked, pressing his face against the window. "Close enough." Adrian unbuckled his seatbelt, then turned to face his son. "Remember what we talked about? Best behavior. Quiet voices. And if you need anything, you tap my arm 3 times, okay? Don't shout across the room." Leo nodded solemnly, already taking his role as assistant seriously. They walked to the front door together, Leo's small hand clasped in Adrian's. Before Adrian could knock, the door swung open. Victoria Hale stood in the doorway, and for a moment, Adrian forgot how to speak. This wasn't the woman he'd seen in board meetings and company presentations. That woman wore tailored suits like armor, her silver-streaked dark hair always pulled into a severe bun, her expression carved from marble. That woman moved through the office like a force of nature, leaving silence and straightened spines in her wake. The person in front of him wore jeans, and a soft gray sweater that looked like something a normal human being would wear on a weekend. Her hair fell loose past her shoulders, and her face, bare of the sharp makeup he'd seen in photos, showed every line of exhaustion and stress. She looked tired. She looked worried. She looked human. "Adrian?" Victoria's voice was different too, still direct, but without the edge that usually made people flinch. Her gaze dropped to Leo, and something flickered across her expression. Surprise, maybe, or concern. "And you must be the assistant." Leo pressed against Adrian's leg, suddenly shy. "This is Leo," Adrian said, his hand protective on his son's shoulder. "I apologize for the situation, Ms. Hale. I wouldn't have brought him if I'd had any other option." "It's Victoria." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "And you're here. That's what matters. Come in." The interior of the house matched its exterior. All clean lines and natural materials, everything carefully curated to look effortless. But as Adrian followed Victoria through the foyer, he noticed details that disrupted the perfection. A coffee mug on the glass console table, leaving a ring. A laptop abandoned on the couch, still open. A cardigan draped over a chair. The house looked lived in, which somehow made it less intimidating. Victoria led them to a home office that overlooked the dark expanse of her backyard. The room was dominated by a massive desk holding 3 monitors, all currently dark. A leather chair sat askew, as if she'd leapt from it in panic. "The system crashed during a backup," Victoria said, moving to stand beside the desk. Her arms were crossed, her shoulders tight with tension. "I was transferring files to an external drive, and everything just stopped. When I rebooted, nothing. Just error messages I don't understand." Adrian set down his laptop bag and began examining the setup. Professional-grade equipment, expensive surge protectors, a network configuration that would make most home users weep with envy. Victoria didn't do anything halfway. "When was your last successful backup?" he asked, already pulling out his diagnostic tools. 3 weeks ago. Everything since then is on the main drive." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. 5 years of work, Adrian. Client files, proprietary research, the entire Meridian presentation. If it's gone, let's not assume the worst yet." Adrian kept his voice calm, the same tone he used when Leo had nightmares. "Most system crashes are recoverable. Even catastrophic ones usually leave traces." He was aware of Victoria watching him as he worked, her anxiety palpable in the small room. Leo had settled into a chair in the corner with Adrian's tablet and headphones, already absorbed in a cartoon about talking trains. For a moment, the only sounds were the quiet clicking of Adrian's keyboard and the distant rumble of thunder outside. "I should have called someone sooner," Victoria said abruptly. I've been sitting here for 4 hours, trying to fix it myself. Reading forums, watching tutorials, but I couldn't. She trailed off, then laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. I run a company with 800 employees. I negotiate million-dollar contracts, but I can't fix my own computer. Adrian glanced up at her. Different skill sets. You're not supposed to know this. I'm supposed to know everything. The words came out fierce and frustrated. That's the expectation. Victoria Hale doesn't make mistakes. Victoria Hale doesn't need help. Victoria Hale certainly doesn't panic like an idiot when her system crashes. There was something raw in her voice that made Adrian pause. He'd never thought about what it cost to be Victoria Hale, to be the person everyone else leaned on, the one who wasn't allowed to show weakness or uncertainty or fear. My wife used to say that the smartest people know when to ask for help, Adrian said quietly. Then he froze, surprised at himself. He never talked about Sarah at work. Never. It was a wall he'd built carefully, keeping his professional and personal lives separate so neither could contaminate the other with grief. But something about this moment, the late hour, the intimacy of the small room, the vulnerability Victoria had already shown, had made him forget to maintain that boundary. Your wife, Victoria repeated. I didn't know you were married. I'm not. Not anymore. Adrian turned back to the computer, focusing on the diagnostic screen even though the words blurred slightly. She passed away 2 years ago. The silence that followed felt different than the awkward quiet that usually came after he mentioned Sarah's death. Most people rushed to fill it with platitudes. I'm so sorry and I can't imagine. Well-meaning words that meant nothing. But Victoria just stood there, absorbing the information. That must be incredibly difficult, she finally said, raising a child alone while working full-time. Some days more than others. Adrian ran a deep scan of the hard drive, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. But he's a good kid. Makes it easier. He looks like you. Adrian smiled despite himself. Everyone says he looks like his mother. Maybe he has your eyes and her spirit. That's how genetics work sometimes, mixing traits until you can't tell where one parent ends and the other begins. It was such a simple observation, but it hit Adrian with unexpected force. Because yes, Leo was exactly that. A living combination of two people who had loved each other, carrying pieces of Sarah even as he grew into his own person. The scan will take about 20 minutes, Adrian said, needing to shift back to safer ground. The drive isn't physically damaged, which is good news. Whatever happened was software related, which means the data is probably still there. Probably. Victoria seized on the word, but not definitely. Nothing in tech is definite, but I've recovered files from worse situations than this. He angled the monitor so she could see the scan in progress. See these markers? That's the system finding fragments of your files. They're there. We just need to convince them to show themselves. Victoria leaned closer to look, and Adrian caught the scent of her perfume, something subtle and expensive that reminded him of cedar and rain. She was close enough that he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the few strands of gray woven through her dark hair, close enough to notice that her hands were shaking slightly. When's the last time you ate? He asked abruptly. Victoria blinked at the change of subject. I don't remember. Lunch, maybe? You should eat something. Anxiety gets worse on an empty stomach. I'm not hungry. Victoria. He used her first name deliberately and saw her surprise at hearing it from him. I can't fix your files if you pass out from low blood sugar. Go eat something. I'll come find you if anything changes. For a moment, he thought she'd argue. The Ice Queen didn't take orders, especially not from basement IT staff. But then she nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. There's a sitting room down the hall, she said, more comfortable than standing here watching progress bars. Would you? She hesitated, and Adrian realized with shock that Victoria Hale was nervous. Would you and Leo like something to drink? I have juice boxes. I keep them for my sister's kids when they visit. Adrian felt Leo perk up at the mention of juice boxes. That would be great, thank you. Victoria left, and Adrian exhaled slowly. The whole situation felt surreal. Sitting in his boss's home office at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, having quasi-personal conversations while his son watched cartoons in the corner. This wasn't how employee-employer relationships worked. There were supposed to be boundaries, professional distance, clear lines between their roles. But those lines were blurring with every passing minute. 20 minutes later, Adrian found Victoria in the sitting room she'd mentioned, a cozy space with a fireplace and shelves lined with books that actually looked red. She'd made tea and set out a plate of cookies alongside Leo's promised juice box. His son was already happily settled on the floor, building something elaborate with a set of wooden blocks he'd found. "The first scan finished," Adrian reported, settling into a chair across from Victoria. "The good news is that most of your files are intact. The bad news is they're corrupted. The system crashed mid-transfer, which scrambled the data structure." Victoria's face went pale. "Can you unscramble it?" "Yes, but it's going to take time. I need to reconstruct the file architecture piece by piece, and I have to do it carefully or I risk making the corruption worse." He accepted the tea she offered, noting absently that she'd remembered how he took it from the office kitchen. "We're looking at several hours minimum." "How many hours?" "Hard to say. 4, maybe 5 if we're lucky. Could be longer if there are complications." Victoria's hands tightened around her own mug. "I can't ask you to stay that long. It's already late, and you have Leo. He'll sleep." Adrian glanced at his son, who was completely absorbed in his block construction. "And honestly, there's nowhere else I need to be. No babysitter waiting, no plans canceled. This is actually easier than trying to coordinate coverage for Monday. Still, this isn't what you signed up for when you accepted the job." "Neither was bringing my kid to work emergencies." Adrian smiled slightly. "I think we're both in uncharted territory tonight." Victoria looked down at her tea, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I'm sorry for the veiled threat earlier on the phone, about the jobs, about your job. That was unfair." Adrian hadn't expected an apology. Victoria Hale wasn't known for admitting mistakes, let alone apologizing to subordinates. "You were panicking. It happens." "It shouldn't. Not from me." She set her mug down with careful precision. "Everyone thinks I'm always in control, always certain. But the truth is, I'm constantly terrified I'm going to make the wrong call and destroy everything I've built. Tonight just made that fear very literal." It was the kind of confession that should have felt uncomfortable, too intimate for their relationship. But somehow it didn't. Maybe because the late hour and unusual circumstances had created a pocket outside normal rules. Or maybe because Adrian understood exactly what she meant, that feeling of being one mistake away from losing everything. "When Sarah died," he found himself saying, "I had this moment of absolute clarity. I realized that I'd spent years building a career, working late, bringing work home on weekends, because I thought that's what success looked like. And then she was gone, and I was standing in a hospital corridor at midnight, and all those extra hours meant nothing. The work I'd been so worried about didn't matter. But I'd missed bedtimes. I'd missed conversations. I'd missed time I couldn't get back." Victoria was watching him with an intensity that should have made him self-conscious, but he kept talking. "So I made different choices. I took a lower position with better hours. I stopped trying to climb the ladder. I focused on being there for Leo, even if it meant my career plateaued." He met her gaze directly. "I don't regret it. But some days I wonder if I gave up too much. If I'm letting Sarah's death define everything I do instead of honoring it and moving forward." The room fell quiet except for the soft clicking of Leo's wooden blocks. Rain had started outside, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm. "I admire that," Victoria said finally. "The fact that you can articulate what matters and make choices that align with it. Most people just react. They let circumstances push them around and tell themselves they don't have options." "You don't think you have options?" "I think I have expectations. From the board, from investors, from 800 employees who depend on me to keep this company profitable so they can feed their families. If I show weakness, if I admit uncertainty, if I make one significant mistake..." She stopped, shaking her head. "There's always someone waiting to take my place. Always someone younger, hungrier, more ruthless." "Sounds exhausting." "It is." Victoria smiled, but there was no humor in it. "But it's the life I chose. The same way you chose to prioritize Leo over your career advancement. We all make our sacrifices." Adrian thought about that as he stood to check on the recovery process. She wasn't wrong. They had both made deliberate choices that shaped their lives. But Victoria sounded lonelier somehow. His sacrifice had brought him closer to his son, created a bond that was one of the few good things to come from tragedy. Hers seemed to have isolated her, trapped her behind walls of her own construction. The next several hours fell into a strange rhythm. Adrian worked methodically through the corrupted files, rebuilding directory structures and validating data integrity. Leo eventually fell asleep on the couch, covered with a soft throw blanket that Victoria produced from somewhere. And Victoria herself stayed nearby, sometimes watching Adrian work, sometimes sitting quietly with her own laptop, occasionally asking technical questions that were surprisingly astute. They talked in fragments, conversation that started and stopped and picked up again without awkwardness. Adrian learned that Victoria had inherited Hale Industries from her father, who'd built it from nothing and expected her to maintain his legacy. That she'd never married because she'd been too focused on proving herself worthy of the company. That she had a younger sister she barely saw and nieces and nephews who were growing up without knowing her. In return, he found himself sharing things he rarely spoke about. How he'd met Sarah in college, both of them studying computer science, both of them believing they could build a life around code and coffee and shared dreams. How they'd planned to have 3 kids, maybe 4, and buy a house with a big yard and a dog. How those plans had evaporated in 90 seconds on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. How some days he still forgot she was gone, still turned to tell her something before remembering that she wasn't there and would never be there again. "I'm sorry," Victoria said when he finished talking about the anniversary of Sarah's death. How he'd taken Leo to her favorite park and they'd released balloons because that's what you did when you were 5, and didn't fully understand that death was permanent. That kind of loss, I can't imagine carrying it. "You do what you have to do," Adrian said simply. "For Leo. He deserves a parent who functions, who shows up, who doesn't drown in grief. So that's what I give him, even on the days when I'm barely holding it together." It was close to 3 in the morning when Adrian finally leaned back from the computer, rolling the tension from his shoulders. "That's the last file. Everything's recovered." Victoria crossed the room quickly, leaning over his shoulder to look at the screen. Her entire file system was laid out in neat directories, every folder accessible, every document intact. "You did it," she breathed. "It's all here. Every presentation, every contract, every piece of research. You actually did it. That's what you pay me for." Adrian began the final backup process, copying everything to 3 separate locations, although usually from a basement office and without an audience. Victoria laughed, a real laugh, bright and genuine and completely unlike the controlled responses he'd heard from her before. "This is definitely not standard IT protocol." "No, definitely not." Adrian glanced at Leo, still sleeping peacefully on the couch. His son's face was peaceful, one hand curled around Jeffrey the giraffe. "I should get him home. It's late, and he's got a soccer game tomorrow. Or today, technically." "Of course." Victoria straightened, and Adrian saw the exhaustion in her face, but also relief so profound it had changed her entire posture. "Adrian, I don't know how to thank you. What you've done tonight, you saved the company, literally. I recovered some files. You're the one who built the company worth saving." Still, she walked him to the office door, then hesitated. "Would it be inappropriate if I said this was the best conversation I've had in months? Maybe years?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "Probably. By most professional standards, everything about tonight was inappropriate." "Right, of course." Victoria's expression shifted, walls going back up. "I apologize. That was... But I'd say it anyway," Adrian interrupted. "The inappropriate part doesn't make it less true." Their eyes met and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strange intimacy they'd stumbled into, the unexpected connection forged during an emergency that had stripped away their usual roles. For these few hours, they hadn't been boss and employee, executive and IT specialist. They'd just been 2 people, talking honestly in the middle of the night. Adrian gathered his equipment and carefully lifted Leo from the couch. His son stirred but didn't wake, automatically curling against his father's shoulder the way he had since he was an infant. Victoria walked them to the front door. The rain had stopped, leaving the night clear and cool. "Drive safely," she said. "And Adrian? Take Monday off, paid. You've earned it. You have a board presentation Monday. You might need..." "I'll be fine. You've given me everything I need." She smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. "Spend the day with Leo. Watch his soccer game. Don't think about work or crashed systems or anything else. Just be his father." It was such a simple gift, but it landed with weight. How long had it been since someone had explicitly told him to prioritize his son without guilt or penalty? "Thank you," Adrian said quietly, "for understanding. Thank you for coming, for staying, for—" Victoria trailed off, then shook her head. "Get some sleep, both of you." Adrian carried Leo to the car and buckled him into his booster seat, where his son immediately settled back into sleep. As he drove down the winding road away from Victoria's house, Adrian kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting the whole night to feel like a dream, but it had been real. All of it. The question was what happened next, because something had shifted tonight, something that couldn't be easily categorized or dismissed. He'd seen behind Victoria Hale's armor, and she'd seen past his careful boundaries. They'd shared confessions and vulnerabilities that couldn't be taken back or forgotten. And on Monday morning, when he returned to his basement office and she went back to the executive floor, they'd both have to pretend that none of it had happened, that they were still just boss and employee, that nothing had changed. But as Adrian drove through the empty streets with his sleeping son beside him, and the memory of Victoria's genuine smile still fresh in his mind, he knew that was a lie they might not be able to maintain. Everything had changed, they just didn't know yet what they were going to do about it. The weekend passed in a blur of normal activities that felt anything but normal. Saturday morning arrived with Leo bouncing on Adrian's bed at 7:30, already dressed in his soccer uniform and clutching a granola bar. "Dad, we're going to be late. Coach Martinez says if you're not early, you're late." Adrian groaned and pulled the pillow over his face. He'd gotten home at 4 in the morning and managed maybe 2 hours of actual sleep before his internal alarm clock, also known as a hyperactive kindergartner, went off. "What time is it?" "7:30. The game starts at 9. We need time to warm up." "Leo, the field is 15 minutes away." "But what if there's traffic?" Adrian couldn't argue with that logic, mostly because his brain was still too foggy to form coherent counterarguments. He dragged himself out of bed, navigated through the minefield of toys scattered across the hallway, and somehow managed to get them both fed and out the door by 8:15. The soccer field was exactly as chaotic as expected. Dozens of 5- and 6-year-olds in mismatched uniforms chasing a ball with the strategic coordination of caffeinated squirrels. Leo's team, the Tigers, wore orange jerseys that were already grass-stained before the game even started. Adrian found a spot on the sideline bleachers next to Marcus Chen, whose daughter Maya was Leo's best friend and the team's most aggressive defender. "You look like death," Marcus observed cheerfully. "Hot date last night?" "Work emergency." Adrian accepted the coffee Marcus offered from his thermos, silently blessing his friend's perpetual over-preparedness. "My boss's computer crashed. Spent most of the night recovering files." "On a Friday? That's brutal." Marcus watched as Maya executed what could generously be called a tackle on an opposing player. "Did you at least get overtime?" "She gave me Monday off instead." "Paid?" "Yeah." Marcus whistled low. "Generous. Most bosses would just expect you to work weekends as part of the job description." Adrian thought about Victoria standing in her doorway in jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the ice queen everyone feared. Thought about the conversations that had stretched through the early morning hours, the unexpected confessions, the moment when she'd told him to spend Monday with Leo without hesitation or resentment. "She's different than I expected," he said finally. Marcus gave him a sideways look. "Different how?" "Just human. Actually cares about things beyond quarterly profits." "Careful, Adrian. You're starting to sound like you respect your boss. That's a dangerous road." "What's wrong with respecting your boss?" "Nothing. If you remember, she's still your boss. But that coffee at 4 a.m. exhaustion you're wearing, combined with that weird tone in your voice? That's how workplace crushes start, my friend." Adrian nearly choked on his coffee. "It's not like that. It was a professional emergency. We barely even talked." "Uh-huh. And I'm the King of England." Marcus grinned as Maya scored a goal by essentially running through 2 defenders like a tiny orange bulldozer. "I've known you 3 years, Adrian. Since Sarah died, you've been locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But you just spent the entire night with a woman who isn't related to you or paying you to fix her plumbing. That's progress. She was paying me to fix her computer. Not the same thing, and you know it. Marcus's expression softened. Look, I'm not saying you should date your boss. That's a terrible idea for about 17 different reasons. But I'm saying that eventually you're allowed to notice when a woman is interesting. You're allowed to have conversations that aren't about dinosaurs or kindergarten drama. You're allowed to be something other than Leo's dad. The words hit harder than Marcus probably intended, because he was right. Somewhere along the way, Adrian had folded himself completely into the role of single father, erasing every other part of his identity. He wasn't Adrian who liked hiking and terrible science fiction movies and playing guitar badly at 2 in the morning. He was just dad, and while he loved being Leo's father more than anything, it had become the only thing. She thanked me for coming, Adrian said quietly, watching Leo chase the ball with single-minded determination. For staying, for understanding, and she meant it, not in a boss-managing employee way. She was genuinely grateful. Then she's smarter than most executives. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Just don't do anything stupid, okay? You've got a good thing going, stable job, decent benefits, a boss who gives you flexibility for Leo. Don't mess that up by catching feelings. Adrian nodded, but Marcus's warning kept echoing through his head for the rest of the game. Don't catch feelings. As if emotions were something you could avoid through careful planning and good judgment, rather than something that ambushed you in the middle of the night while you were rebuilding corrupted file systems. Monday morning arrived with the strange disorientation of a weekday that felt like a weekend. Adrian made Leo breakfast, packed his lunch with the requisite goldfish crackers and apple slices, and walked him to the bus stop. Then he returned to an empty house with no agenda and no pressing obligations. He tried to enjoy it, caught up on laundry, fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom that had been dripping for 3 weeks, even started a novel he'd been meaning to read since last Christmas. But his mind kept drifting back to Friday night, to the intimacy of those early morning conversations, to the way Victoria had looked when she laughed, unguarded and genuine. His phone buzzed at 11:30, a text from an unknown number. The presentation went perfectly. The board approved the Meridian contract. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you again. VH. Adrian stared at the message for a full minute, analyzing it the way he'd analyze code for vulnerabilities. Professional, appropriate. Exactly the kind of text a boss should send an employee who'd provided exceptional service. Except she'd used her personal number, and she'd signed it with her initials, as if he might not know who VH was. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on something simple. Glad I could help. Congratulations on the contract. The response came back almost immediately. Are you enjoying your day off? Trying to. Turns out I'm not very good at relaxing. I have the same problem. My assistant keeps finding me in the office on weekends and physically escorting me out. Adrian smiled despite himself. He could picture that. Victoria so absorbed in work that she lost track of time. Someone having to literally remove her from the building. Leo's at school, he typed. I've already done laundry and fixed everything that was broken in the house. Now I'm just existing. That's not a bad thing. Existing without purpose or pressure. Says the woman who probably hasn't taken a real day off in years. There was a longer pause before the next message arrived. Guilty as charged, but I'm trying to be better about it. Last night I actually left the office at 6. My team almost called an ambulance. Adrian laughed out loud in his empty kitchen. He could imagine the shock. Victoria Hale leaving at a reasonable hour must have been apocalyptic. They texted on and off for the next hour, casual conversation that had nothing to do with work. She asked about Leo's soccer game. He asked about her sister's kids. She recommended a book she'd just finished. He sent her a photo of his catastrophic attempt at fixing the bathroom faucet, which had somehow resulted in a small flood. It felt easy, natural, like talking to a friend rather than his boss. And that, Adrian realized, was the problem. Because Marcus was right, this was dangerous territory. Every text blurred the professional boundaries a little more. Every casual conversation made it harder to remember that Victoria Hale wasn't his friend. She was his employer. That there were power dynamics and workplace regulations and a dozen excellent reasons why this couldn't become something more than what it was. But when his phone buzzed again at 2 o'clock with a message that said, I just realized I never asked if you actually like working in IT or if you fell into it by accident. He answered anyway. Fell into it. I was going to be a software developer, build apps, maybe start my own company. Then Sarah got pregnant and we needed stability, so I took the first job with good benefits. Do you regret it? Adrian thought about that question for a long time. Did he regret choosing security over ambition? Did he resent the path that Sarah's death had locked him into? No, he typed finally. But sometimes I wonder who I would have become if things had been different, if Sarah hadn't died, if I'd taken bigger risks. It's not too late. You're what, 32? 34. Still young enough to take risks, to build something new. With a 5-year-old depending on me? Not really. Maybe you're thinking about it wrong. Maybe the risk isn't choosing between stability and ambition. Maybe it's staying in a role that doesn't challenge you because you're afraid of what happens if you fail. The message sat on his screen like an accusation. Because she was right, wasn't she? He'd been hiding in his basement office for 3 years, telling himself it was about Leo, about being present and available. But part of it was fear. Fear of failing, fear of trying and falling short, fear of proving that he wasn't capable of more than fixing other people's technical problems. You sound like my therapist, he sent back. You see a therapist? Saw. After Sarah died. He kept trying to get me to talk about my feelings and set goals for the future. I mostly just sat there in silence and counted the minutes until I could leave. Did it help? Eventually, once I stopped fighting it and actually engaged with the process. Maybe I should try that. Adrian hesitated, then typed carefully. You don't talk to anyone about the pressure, the isolation, all of it? I have my sister, sometimes, when we're not too busy avoiding each other's lives. That's not the same as actually talking to someone objective, someone whose job is to help you process. I know, but admitting I need therapy feels like admitting weakness, and Victoria Hale isn't allowed to be weak. Adrian's chest tightened reading that message. The loneliness in it, the weight of expectations she'd been carrying alone for years. Everyone needs help sometimes, he wrote. That's not weakness, that's just being human. Her response took several minutes. How did you get so wise? Grief. Turns out losing your wife at 32 teaches you a lot about what actually matters. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so flippant. You weren't. And I'm not fragile. You can talk about Sarah without worrying you'll break me. Still, I know what it's like when people treat you like you're made of glass. After my father died, everyone walked on eggshells around me, like acknowledging my loss might shatter me into pieces. How old were you? 26. He had a heart attack in his office. One minute he was arguing with a supplier over shipping costs, the next minute he was on the floor, and I was making decisions about life support. Adrian read the message twice, understanding clicking into place. That's why she'd taken over Hale Industries so young. That's why she drove herself so relentlessly. She was trying to prove herself worthy of an inheritance she'd never asked for. That's a lot of weight for 26, he wrote. It was. Some days it still is. They were crossing lines with every message, Adrian knew. Sharing things that bosses and employees shouldn't share, creating intimacy that had no place in a professional relationship. But he didn't stop. And neither did she. Tuesday morning, Adrian returned to work expecting everything to snap back to normal. He'd descend to his basement office, Victoria would retreat to the executive floor, and Friday night would become a strange memory they'd both politely ignore. Instead, he found a note on his desk. Please come to my office at 10 a.m. VH. Adrian's stomach dropped. This was it, the conversation where she'd gently but firmly reestablish professional boundaries, where she'd thank him again for his help, then make it clear that their late-night conversations and personal text exchanges couldn't continue. He showed up at her office at exactly 10 o'clock, wearing his least wrinkled button-down shirt and rehearsing polite ways to agree with whatever she said. Victoria's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, waved him through immediately. She's expecting you. The executive office was everything Adrian had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than his car, abstract art that was either brilliant or completely random. Victoria sat behind a glass desk, wearing a charcoal suit that was all business. But when she looked up and saw him, she smiled. The same genuine smile from Friday night, the one that transformed her entire face. Adrian, thank you for coming. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please sit. He sat, hands clasped in his lap like a student called to the principal's office. I've been thinking about our conversation on Friday, Victoria began, and Adrian braced himself for the inevitable letdown. About what you said regarding your career, how you took a position with fewer demands so you could prioritize Leo. Yes. And I've been reviewing your personnel file. Your performance evaluations, your project history, the feedback from colleagues. She pulled up something on her computer, angling the screen so he couldn't see it. You're overqualified for your current position, significantly. Adrian blinked. I appreciate that, but let me finish. Victoria's tone was gentle but firm. You have a master's degree in computer science from a prestigious university. Your thesis was on network security architecture. Before you took the IT position here, you were a senior developer at TechStream, leading a team of 8 on enterprise software projects. That was before Leo, before Sarah died. I needed something with regular hours and flexibility, so you accepted a position 3 levels below your qualifications and spent 3 years fixing password resets and troubleshooting printer connections. Victoria leaned forward, her expression intense. Adrian, you're brilliant. What you did Friday night, recovering those files from a catastrophic corruption, most IT specialists couldn't have done that. You saw patterns in the data fragments that even I couldn't see, and I built this company from the ground up. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing work far beyond your job description. Victoria pulled a folder from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. I want to offer you a position. Adrian opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a job description for a newly created role. Director of Technology Infrastructure. The salary was nearly double what he currently made. The benefits package was extraordinary. He couldn't finish the sentence. It's a leadership position, Victoria explained. You'd oversee all our IT systems, manage a team of 15, and work directly with department heads to develop technology solutions. The hours are flexible. I don't care if you work from home half the week or leave at 3 to pick up Leo from school, as long as the work gets done. We can structure it around your life. Adrian's hands trembled slightly as he read through the job description. This was the kind of position he'd dreamed about years ago, before grief had convinced him to play it safe. Why? He asked. Why now? Is this because of Friday night? Yes and no. Victoria chose her words carefully. Friday night showed me what I already suspected, that you have skills we're not utilizing. But this isn't a thank you gift or favoritism. It's a genuine business decision. We need someone with your expertise in this role, and I think you'd excel at it. Victoria, I appreciate this. I really do. But I left leadership positions for a reason. The late nights, the travel, the pressure. I can't do that to Leo again. I'm not asking you to. She stood and moved to the window, her back to him. I'm offering you a chance to use your skills without sacrificing your priorities. To build something meaningful while still being the father Leo needs. Is that really so impossible? Adrian stared at the folder, his mind racing through 1,000 calculations. The money would mean Leo could go to better schools, maybe save for college. The challenge would pull him out of the comfortable rut he'd been living in. The opportunity could change everything, but it was also terrifying. What if I fail? The question came out quieter than he intended. What if I take this position and I'm terrible at it? What if I prove that I'm not capable of more than password resets and printer troubleshooting? Victoria turned to face him, and her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it. Then you fail, and we figure out what went wrong and fix it. That's how growth works, Adrian. You take the risk, and sometimes you stumble, and then you get back up. Easy for you to say. You're not the one with a kid depending on your steady paycheck. No, but I am the one who inherited a company at 26 and spent the first 3 years convinced I was going to destroy my father's legacy. I know what it's like to be terrified of failing people who believe in you. Adrian looked down at the job description again, reading through the responsibilities. Leading teams, developing strategy, making decisions that would affect the entire company. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. Victoria returned to her desk, her professional mask sliding back into place. But Adrian, I wouldn't be offering this if I didn't genuinely believe you could do it, and do it well. He left her office with the folder clutched in his hand and his mind spinning. The rest of the day passed in a haze. He tried to focus on work tickets, but his thoughts kept drifting to the job offer, to the way Victoria had looked at him when she said she believed in him. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Adrian called his sister. "You want my honest opinion?" Rachel asked after he had explained the situation. "Take the job." "Just like that? No concerns about the risks?" "Of course I have concerns. But Adrian, you've been treading water for 3 years. This is a chance to actually swim. What if I drown? Then we'll pull you out and try something else, but you won't drown. You're too stubborn for that." Rachel paused, and Adrian could hear her kids arguing in the background. "Is this really about the job? Or is it about your boss?" Adrian's breath caught. "What do you mean? Come on, you've mentioned Victoria 4 times in this conversation without realizing it. Victoria thinks I can do it. Victoria structured the role around my schedule. Victoria said she believes in me. That's not how you talk about a normal boss-employee relationship. It's not like that. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've developed feelings for someone who's actually seeing you instead of just the grieving widower with a kid. Rachel, I'm not judging you, Adrian. I'm just saying maybe the job isn't the scary part. Maybe what's scary is that taking this position means working closely with someone who makes you feel something other than numb for the first time in 2 years." After they hung up, Adrian sat in his dark living room for a long time, staring at the folder. Rachel was wrong. She had to be wrong. This wasn't about Victoria personally. It was about the opportunity, the challenge, the chance to be more than what he'd settled for. But when his phone buzzed with a text message at 10:30, his heart jumped before he even looked at the screen. "I know you're probably overthinking the job offer. Stop catastrophizing and get some sleep. Whatever you decide, it'll be okay. VH." Adrian smiled despite himself. She knew him too well already, understood the spirals his brain went into when faced with big decisions. "How did you know I was overthinking?" he texted back. "Because I've been doing the same thing, wondering if offering you the position was overstepping, if I'm letting Friday night cloud my professional judgment, if I'm seeing potential that isn't actually there." "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I'm offering this job to Adrian Cole, the brilliant technologist who saved my company's most important contract. Not to the man I talked to until 4 in the morning. Those are separate things, even if they happen to be the same person." "Are they? Separate things?" The pause before her response was longer this time. "I don't know. That's what scares me." Adrian stared at those words, understanding the weight behind them. Because this wasn't one-sided, was it? Whatever was developing between them, whatever connection they'd formed that night, it was mutual. And that made it infinitely more complicated. "For what it's worth," he typed carefully, "I think you're an exceptional businesswoman. Smart, strategic, capable of seeing potential in people who've stopped seeing it in themselves. That's why you've built something remarkable. The fact that you're also kind and funny and surprisingly easy to talk to at 4 in the morning, that's just additional evidence of good character." "Adrian." "Yeah?" "That was dangerously close to flirting." "Was it? I was going for honest professional assessment. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "No, I guess they're not." He could almost hear her laugh through the text. Could picture her sitting in her own house, probably still wearing her work clothes, smiling at her phone the way he was smiling at his. This was dangerous. Marcus was right. Rachel was right. Every rational part of his brain was right. Developing feelings for his boss, especially while considering a major promotion, was a terrible idea stacked on top of several other terrible ideas. But when his phone buzzed again with a simple, "Good night, Adrian," he saved her number in his contacts with a small heart emoji next to her name before he could stop himself. Then he immediately deleted it, mortified at his own absurdity. Then he added it back, because maybe, just maybe, some risks were worth taking, even if they terrified him. Especially if they terrified him. Wednesday morning, Adrian walked into Victoria's office and set the signed contract on her desk. "I'll take the position," he said simply. Victoria's smile could have lit up the entire city. The transition wasn't immediate. Adrian spent 2 weeks training his replacement in the basement IT office while simultaneously learning the scope of his new responsibilities. His team of 15 ranged from fresh college graduates to veterans who'd been with Hale Industries longer than he'd been alive. Most of them greeted the news of his promotion with polite professionalism, though Adrian caught the skeptical glances exchanged when they thought he wasn't looking. He couldn't blame them. From their perspective, he was an unknown quantity who'd somehow leapfrogged several pay grades in a matter of days. Office gossip moved faster than their fiber optic network, and Adrian had already heard 3 different theories about his rapid promotion, ranging from nepotism to blackmail to the rather creative suggestion that he discovered Victoria was embezzling and leveraged it for advancement. "Let them talk," Victoria said when he mentioned it during their first official one-on-one meeting. "They'll judge you based on results, not rumors. Give them good work and the gossip dies on its own." She was right, as usual. Within the first week, Adrian identified a critical vulnerability in their customer database that could have resulted in a massive breach. He quietly fixed it, documented the solution, and sent a company-wide memo explaining the issue in plain language that even the marketing department could understand. By the second week, when he implemented a new ticketing system that cut response times in half, the skeptical glances had started shifting into grudging respect. But the real test came 3 weeks into his new role, during the quarterly technology review with the entire executive team. Adrian stood at the head of the conference table, his laptop connected to the massive screen behind him, and tried not to think about the fact that 8 of the company's most powerful people were staring at him with varying degrees of interest and impatience. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, her expression carefully neutral. "Our current infrastructure is outdated," Adrian began, pulling up a network diagram that looked like a plate of spaghetti. "We're running systems that were implemented 12 years ago, patched repeatedly but never fully upgraded. It's like trying to run modern software on a computer from the early 2000s. Technically possible, but inefficient and vulnerable." Robert Chen, the chief financial officer, leaned back in his chair. "How much would a full upgrade cost?" "Approximately $2.3 million over 18 months. The number landed like a brick. Several executives exchanged glances. Robert's expression hardened into something between skepticism and outright hostility. "That's a significant investment for technology that's currently working," Robert said. "What's the ROI?" Adrian had prepared for this question. He'd spent the last 3 days running projections, building models, stress testing every assumption. Reduced downtime saves approximately $400,000 annually in lost productivity. Improved security prevents potential breaches that could cost anywhere from $5 to $50 million in damages, legal fees, and reputation loss. Better system integration increases efficiency across departments, which our preliminary analysis suggests could improve overall output by 15 to 20%. "Suggests," Robert repeated, seizing on the word. "So you're asking for $2 million based on a suggestion?" "I'm asking for $2 million based on data analysis and industry best practices. But you're right that there's uncertainty. Every major technology initiative involves risk. Risk we can't afford right now. We just secured the Meridian contract. Our resources need to go toward delivery, not speculative IT upgrades." Adrian felt the meeting slipping away from him. Around the table, several executives were nodding in agreement with Robert's assessment. This was exactly what he'd feared, being dismissed as the IT guy who didn't understand business realities, who wanted expensive toys without appreciating budget constraints. Then Victoria spoke for the first time since the meeting started. "Robert, when was the last time you updated your personal computer?" The CFO blinked at the unexpected question. "I don't see how that's relevant." "Humor me. When?" "Last year. Why?" "Because it was getting slow, I imagine. Running sluggish, taking longer to process information, vulnerable to security threats." Victoria's tone was conversational, almost casual. "You replaced it because the cost of a new computer was less than the cost of lost productivity and potential problems, correct?" "That's different. A personal computer costs $1,000, not $2 million. The principle is identical. We're running this company on outdated infrastructure because we've been too focused on short-term costs to invest in long-term stability." Victoria looked around the table, meeting each executive's eyes. "Adrian isn't asking for speculative upgrades. He's asking us to fix problems we've been ignoring because they haven't catastrophically failed yet. That's not speculation. That's preventive maintenance." "With all due respect, Victoria, you're not a technology expert," Robert said, his voice tight. You're emotionally invested in this because Adrian saved your files last month, but we can't make multi-million-dollar decisions based on gratitude. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several executives suddenly found their notepads fascinating. Adrian watched Victoria's expression shift, not into anger, but into something colder and more dangerous. This was the Ice Queen he'd heard about, the woman who'd built a company through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. You're absolutely right, Robert. I'm not a technology expert. Her voice was perfectly controlled. That's why I hired someone who is. Someone with a master's degree from Stanford, 8 years of experience in enterprise systems, and a track record of solving problems that stumped everyone else. Adrian earned this position through expertise, not gratitude. And if you're suggesting otherwise, we should have that conversation privately. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Robert's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Victoria turned back to Adrian, her expression softening slightly. Walk us through the implementation timeline. If we approve this today, when would we see results? Adrian pulled up the next slide, his hands steadier than they'd been 5 minutes ago. Phase 1 begins immediately and addresses critical security vulnerabilities. That's a 6-week project with minimal disruption to daily operations. Phase 2 focuses on infrastructure upgrades and runs parallel to our normal workflow over the next year. Phase 3 integrates everything and optimizes performance. Full implementation takes 18 months, but we'll see measurable improvements within the first quarter. The questions came rapid fire after that. Technical details, budget breakdowns, risk assessments. Adrian answered each one thoroughly, backing up every claim with data. He could feel the room shifting as he spoke, skepticism gradually giving way to cautious interest. By the time the meeting ended 90 minutes later, the executive team had approved the full budget with only minor modifications. Adrian gathered his materials with shaking hands, adrenaline still coursing through his system. Victoria caught his eye as the other executives filed out, giving him the smallest nod of approval. Adrian, a moment please, she said as Robert Chen was leaving. Robert paused in the doorway, his expression unreadable. That was impressive work, he said stiffly. I apologize if my questions seemed hostile. I was doing my due diligence. No apology necessary, Adrian replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Tough questions make for better solutions. After Robert left, Victoria closed the conference room door. How are you feeling? She asked. Adrian laughed, the sound slightly unhinged, like I just survived a firing squad. Robert can be aggressive during budget reviews. He's protective of the company's financial health, which makes him valuable. But he also has a tendency to dismiss ideas that don't originate from the executive team. He wasn't wrong to question me. I'm asking for a massive investment based on projections. You're asking for what the company needs. There's a difference. Victoria moved closer, her voice dropping slightly. You did well in there. Better than well. You owned that room. Only because you backed me up. If I hadn't stepped in, you would have found another way to make your case. I just accelerated the process. She smiled, and Adrian saw genuine pride in her expression. This is why I offered you the position, Adrian. Not because you fixed my computer, but because you have the expertise and the courage to tell difficult truths. They were standing close enough that Adrian could smell her perfume again. That same cedar and rain scent from the night in her home office. Close enough that he could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the slight upturn of her lips. Close enough that leaving felt like a physical effort. I should get back to work, he said, forcing himself to step away. Need to start phase 1 planning. Of course. But Adrian? Victoria's hand brushed his arm briefly, a contact so light it might have been accidental. Thank you for taking the risk, for accepting the position, for believing you could do this. You're the one who believed first. Maybe we both needed someone else to believe in us. The moment stretched between them, heavy with everything they weren't saying. Then Diane knocked on the conference room door, breaking the spell. Your 2 o'clock is here, the assistant called through the glass. Victoria's professional mask slid back into place. Send them in. Adrian, we'll schedule a follow-up meeting for next week to discuss implementation details. Sounds good. He left before he could say anything else, before he could acknowledge the way his heart was racing or the warmth still lingering where her hand had touched his arm. That evening, Adrian picked up Leo from after-school care and drove to the grocery store. His son chattered the entire way about a lizard they'd found on the playground and whether they could get a pet lizard and if lizards could eat goldfish crackers. Lizards eat bugs, buddy, not crackers. But what if it was a special lizard that liked crackers? Then we'd have a very unusual pet. Leo considered this seriously as they navigated the produce section. Adrian was examining apples when his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Drinks Friday night? Jennifer's taking the kids to her mom's, and I need adult conversation that doesn't involve animated characters. Adrian was about to reply when Leo tugged on his sleeve. Dad, look! He turned to find his son pointing excitedly down the aisle. Victoria stood near the dairy section, wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked softer than she did at work, more like the woman who'd opened her door 3 weeks ago looking exhausted and vulnerable. Their eyes met across the crowded store, and Adrian saw the exact moment she recognized him. Her expression shifted from surprise to pleasure to something more complicated. Is that your boss? Leo asked loudly, because 5-year-olds had no concept of volume control. Yeah, that's Ms. Hale. The one whose computer you fixed? That's right. Can I say hi? Before Adrian could answer, Leo was already weaving through the shopping carts toward Victoria. Adrian followed, mortified and oddly charmed by his son's complete lack of social anxiety. Hi, Leo announced when he reached her. I'm Leo. You're my dad's boss. He says you have a really important job. Victoria crouched down to Leo's eye level, her smile genuine. Hi, Leo. Your dad has told me about you, too. He says you're an excellent assistant. I am. I helped him fix your computer. I was very quiet and I didn't touch anything. That's very professional of you. Do you have any kids? Leo, Adrian interjected, finally catching up. That's a personal question. It's okay, Victoria said, still focused on Leo. I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews who visit sometimes. Do they like lizards? I think so. Doesn't everyone like lizards? Leo beamed, clearly delighted to have found a kindred spirit. That's what I told my dad, but he says we can't get a pet lizard. I said we'd think about it, Adrian corrected. Thinking about it means no. Leo looked at Victoria conspiratorially. Adults always say they'll think about it when they mean no. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. That's very wise. You're clearly smarter than most adults. They talked for a few more minutes, casual conversation about Leo's school and his soccer team and the ongoing lizard debate. Adrian watched Victoria interact with his son, noticing how naturally she engaged with him, how she listened to his rambling stories about playground adventures without the glazed expression most adults got around enthusiastic kindergartners. We should let Ms. Hale finish her shopping, Adrian said eventually, aware they'd been monopolizing her time. Okay? Leo turned back to Victoria. It was nice meeting you. You should come to my soccer game sometime. We're really good. We won last week. I'd like that, Victoria said, and Adrian heard the sincerity in her voice. They parted ways at the end of the aisle, Leo already launching into another story about the lizard. Adrian tried to focus on his son's words, but his mind kept drifting back to the way Victoria had looked crouching next to Leo, the genuine warmth in her expression when she'd said she'd like to come to a soccer game. His phone buzzed as they were loading groceries into the car. Your son is delightful and very persistent about the lizard situation. Adrian smiled as he typed back. He gets that from his mother. Sarah could convince anyone of anything if she argued long enough. Smart woman. The smartest. She would have liked you, I think. He sent the message before he could second-guess it, then immediately wondered if it was too much, too personal, too revealing. But Victoria's response came quickly. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in years. That night, after Leo was asleep, Adrian sat on his back porch with a beer and his phone. The conversation with Victoria had continued in fragments throughout the evening. Nothing serious, just the kind of easy back and forth that felt dangerously comfortable. Question, she texted around 10 o'clock. When you took this position, did you think about how it would change our dynamic? Adrian stared at the message, understanding the weight behind it. Constantly, he wrote back. I'm still thinking about it. And I don't know how to navigate it. The professional boundaries make sense. They exist for good reasons, but they also feel increasingly artificial, given that we've already crossed most of them. We could uncross them. Go back to being just boss and employee. Could we, though? Could you honestly sit in a meeting with me and pretend we haven't talked until 4 in the morning? Pretend you don't know about Sarah or that I don't know about your father? The pause was longer this time. No, I don't think I could. So what do we do? I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. Neither have I. I've never even thought about dating since Sarah died. Adrian hit send before realizing what he'd just admitted. The word dating hung between them, making concrete something they'd been carefully dancing around for weeks. Is that what this is? Victoria texted. Dating? I don't know. What do you call two people who text constantly, share personal information, and light up when they see each other in grocery stores? Dangerously close to unprofessional? That too. Adrian could almost hear her laugh through the phone. He imagined her sitting in her home office or on her couch, smiling at her screen the way he was smiling at his. I have rules about workplace relationships, Victoria wrote. Clear policies that exist for everyone's protection. If we did this, if we acknowledged what's happening and decided to pursue it, we'd have to be careful, transparent. We'd need to document everything with HR, make sure no one could accuse you of receiving preferential treatment. And if they did anyway, if people assumed you promoted me because of personal feelings rather than professional merit, then we'd deal with it. Together. The word together did something to Adrian's chest, made it tight and warm simultaneously. I have a rule too, he texted, about Leo. Anyone I'm involved with needs to understand that he comes first. Always. No exceptions. As it should be. I wouldn't respect you if you prioritized anything above your son. Even your company? Especially my company. Organizations can be rebuilt. Childhoods can't. Adrian read that message 3 times, feeling something shift inside him. Because Victoria understood. She actually understood what mattered and why. Understood that he wasn't using Leo as an excuse or a shield, but as the foundation of every decision he made. So, hypothetically, he wrote carefully, if we decided to see where this goes, what would that look like? Hypothetically? We'd start slow. Dinner, maybe. Somewhere quiet where we could talk without worrying about being seen by half the company. We'd figure out if this connection we have translates to something real outside of emergency computer repairs and late-night texts. And if it does, then we'd take the next step. And the one after that, carefully, thoughtfully, making sure we're not hurting Leo or the company or ourselves. That's very rational. I'm trying to be rational, but honestly, Adrian, rational went out the window the night you showed up at my house with your son and looked at my corrupted files like they were a puzzle you couldn't wait to solve. Adrian's heart was doing complicated things in his chest. So this is real? What we're feeling? I think so. I think it has been since that first night, but we've both been too careful to admit it. He sat with that truth for a long moment, watching the stars appear above his quiet neighborhood. Somewhere inside the house, Leo was dreaming about lizards and soccer and whatever else occupied the mind of a 5-year-old. The life Adrian had built since Sarah's death was peaceful, predictable, safe, and Victoria was offering to disrupt all of it. I'm terrified, he texted honestly. Me too. What if we try this and it doesn't work? What if it affects my job, our working relationship, everything we've both worked for? What if we don't try it and spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been? Adrian thought about Sarah, about the promises they'd made to each other in the hospital during those final terrible minutes. She'd made him swear he wouldn't stop living, wouldn't let grief turn him into a ghost going through motions. She'd said he deserved happiness, deserved love, deserved to build a new life, even though she wouldn't be there to share it. He'd kept that promise in small ways. Staying present for Leo, maintaining friendships, getting out of bed even on the days when everything hurt. But he'd never considered that it might mean opening his heart to someone new, letting himself feel something beyond the safe boundaries of grief and single parenthood. Okay, he typed, the word feeling momentous. Let's try. Slow, careful, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. But let's try. Yeah? Yeah. I want to see where this goes, Victoria. With you. Saturday night. There's a restaurant in Millbrook, about 30 minutes from here. Quiet, good food, low chance of running into anyone from work. 7 o'clock? I'll need to arrange childcare. Take your time. We're not in a rush. But they were, Adrian thought. They'd already been moving toward this moment since that first night, pulled together by something neither of them fully understood. The only question was whether they'd find the courage to stop resisting. "Saturday works," he texted. 7 o'clock. "It's a date." Adrian stared at those 3 words, feeling the last of his resistance crumble. It was a date. An actual, intentional, mutually acknowledged date with his boss, with a woman who made him feel alive in ways he'd forgotten were possible. "Adrian?" Another message came through. "One more thing." "What's that?" "I'm really glad you walked into that grocery store tonight." He smiled into the darkness, feeling something like hope bloom in his chest. "Me too." Friday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy Adrian hadn't felt since he was a teenager preparing for prom. Except this was exponentially more complicated than high school dating. This involved his career, his son's stability, and a woman who controlled significant aspects of his professional life. Rachel called during his lunch break, her voice amused. "So, you're dating your boss. How did you—" "Never mind. Marcus told you." "Marcus told Jennifer, who told me. But yes." Adrian Cole, the man who spent 2 years treating dating like a theoretical concept, is going on an actual date with Victoria Hale, the Ice Queen herself. Don't call her that. Protective already. Interesting. Rachel's tone shifted to something more serious. "Are you sure about this? I know I encouraged you to consider it, but there's a difference between acknowledging attraction and actually pursuing a relationship with someone who has power over your employment. We've talked about it, established boundaries, discussed the risks. We're going into this with open eyes. And Leo, have you thought about what it means to introduce someone into his life?" "Of course I have. It's all I've thought about." Adrian rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar weight of single-parent anxiety. "But Victoria understands that Leo comes first. She's not asking me to choose between them." "Not yet. But Adrian, relationships change things. They demand time and energy and emotional availability. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know, but I know I'm ready to try." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Sarah would want this for you. You know that, right? She wouldn't want you living like a monk forever." "I know." "Then I'm happy for you, terrified on your behalf, but happy. Just promise me you'll be careful, with your heart and with Leo's." "I promise." That evening, Adrian asked Marcus to watch Leo on Saturday night. "Hot date with the boss?" Marcus said, grinning. "It's just dinner." "Uh-huh. And I'm just a casual soccer dad, not someone who takes this league way too seriously." Marcus's expression turned thoughtful. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. You've been stuck in grief mode for 2 years. It's time to start living again." "That's what everyone keeps saying." "Because it's true. Sarah's gone, Adrian. That's a tragedy that will never stop hurting. But you're still here, Leo's still here, and you both deserve more than just surviving." Saturday afternoon, Adrian dropped Leo at Marcus's house with enough snacks and entertainment to last a week. His son was thrilled at the prospect of an impromptu playdate with Maya, already planning elaborate games involving pirates and a treehouse. "You look fancy," Leo observed, taking in Adrian's button-down shirt and actual dress pants instead of his usual jeans. "I'm having dinner with a friend." "Is it Ms. Hale? The one from the grocery store?" Adrian hesitated, uncertain how much to share. "Yeah, it is." "Cool. She's nice, and she likes lizards." Leo grabbed his backpack and ran toward the house where Maya was already waiting. "Bye, Dad." "Bye, Dad." Marcus appeared in the doorway, giving Adrian a knowing look. "Go. Have fun. Don't overthink it." Too late for that. The drive to Millbrook gave Adrian 30 minutes to spiral through every possible disaster scenario. What if they had nothing to talk about outside of work? What if the attraction they'd felt evaporated in a normal setting? What if someone from the company saw them and started spreading rumors before they'd even figured out what this was? But when he walked into the restaurant and saw Victoria waiting at a corner table, all his anxieties temporarily quieted. She'd left her hair down, and she wore a dark blue dress that was elegant without being overly formal. She looked beautiful and nervous, and exactly like someone on a first date. "Hi," she said as he approached, her smile uncertain. "Hi," Adrian sat down across from her, suddenly feeling like he was 16 again and had no idea how dating worked. You look amazing. So do you. I don't think I've ever seen you in anything other than work clothes or that Saturday morning dad outfit you were wearing at the grocery store. This is my fancy shirt. I save it for special occasions. Am I a special occasion? I think you might be. The tension between them eased slightly as they ordered wine and studied the menu. The restaurant was exactly what Victoria had promised: quiet, intimate, with enough other diners that they didn't feel conspicuous, but not so crowded that they couldn't have a private conversation. I've been thinking about what you said, Victoria began once their wine arrived. About Sarah. How she would have liked me. You have? I never knew what to say when people mention their deceased spouses. There's no social script for it, but I realize now that treating it like a forbidden topic is worse than acknowledging it awkwardly. She met his eyes directly. So I want to know about her, about your life together, about what you loved, about who she was. If you're comfortable sharing. Adrian felt something in his chest crack open, because no one asked about Sarah anymore. People tiptoed around her memory, treating her death like something toxic that might contaminate conversation. But Victoria was asking to know her, to understand the woman who'd shaped Adrian's life. So he told her about meeting Sarah in an intro programming class, how she'd been the only person who laughed at his terrible coding jokes, about their wedding at a tiny vineyard, just family and close friends, about the way she'd reorganized their entire apartment according to a color-coding system that made no sense to anyone but her, about her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she'd argued about everything from politics to pizza toppings, about the baby they'd planned so carefully, and how she'd been terrified and thrilled in equal measure when Leo was born. About the ordinary Tuesday afternoon when everything ended, how he'd gotten the call at work, how he'd driven to the hospital knowing something was catastrophically wrong, how the doctors had said words like aneurysm and nothing we could do, while his world collapsed. Victoria listened without interruption, her hand eventually reaching across the table to cover his. She sounds extraordinary, she said when he finished. She was, and loving her, losing her, it changed everything about who I am. Sometimes I'm not sure where Sarah's influence ends and my own identity begins. I don't think those things are separate. The people we love become part of us. They shape our values, our choices, the way we move through the world. Victoria's thumb traced small circles on the back of his hand. Loving Sarah made you into the father Leo has, into the man who drove to a stranger's house at night because someone needed help. That's not something to untangle from yourself. It's something to honor. Adrian blinked back unexpected tears. You always know exactly what to say. Not always. Usually I say the wrong thing and alienate people, but with you, she paused, seeming to search for words. With you it feels different, like I can be honest without worrying about maintaining an image. Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Leo's ongoing lizard campaign, Victoria's sister's chaotic family dinners, their shared love of terrible science fiction movies. They talked and laughed and shared bites of each other's entrees like people who'd known each other for years rather than weeks. And somewhere between the main course and dessert, Adrian realized something that should have terrified him, but instead felt inevitable. He was falling for Victoria Hale, not the ice queen from Office Gossip, not his intimidating boss, but the woman who texted him at midnight with random observations, who crouched down to talk to his 5-year-old about lizards, who trusted him with her vulnerabilities and honored his grief without flinching. "What are you thinking?" Victoria asked, catching him staring. "That I'm glad we're doing this, that I was scared for nothing. The night's not over yet. I could still reveal myself to be secretly terrible. I'm willing to take that risk." They lingered over coffee, neither wanting the evening to end. Eventually, the waiter began giving them pointed looks, and they settled the check and walked outside into the cool night air. "I should get home," Adrian said reluctantly. "Marcus is watching Leo, but I don't want to take advantage." "Of course." Victoria hesitated, then stepped closer. "Adrian, thank you for tonight, for trusting me with your story, for giving this a chance despite all the very good reasons not to. Thank you for asking, for seeing me as something other than the IT guy who fixes problems." They stood in the parking lot, the space between them charged with possibility. Adrian wanted to kiss her, wanted it with an intensity that surprised him, but something held him back. The newness of this, maybe. Or the awareness that once they crossed that line, there was no going back to being just colleagues. Victoria seemed to understand. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "Text me when you get home?" she asked. "I will." He drove back to Marcus's house feeling lighter than he had in 2 years, like some burden he'd been carrying had finally shifted. Leo was asleep on the couch when he arrived, worn out from hours of pirate adventures. "Good night?" Marcus asked quietly. "Really good." "You're smiling. I don't think I've seen you actually smile in months." "I know." Adrian carried Leo to the car, his son barely stirring. On the drive home, his phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "I don't want tonight to be a one-time thing. I want more of this. More of you. Is that okay?" Adrian pulled into his driveway and typed back with one hand while keeping the other on his sleeping son's shoulder. "It's more than okay. It's everything." The following Monday morning, Adrian and Victoria met with Helen Crawford, the head of human resources, in her office on the 3rd floor. Helen was a sharp woman in her late 50s who'd seen every workplace situation imaginable and maintained a poker face that would make professional gamblers jealous. "So," Helen said, folding her hands on her desk after they'd explained the situation, "you're disclosing a romantic relationship between an executive and a direct report. That's exactly the kind of proactive transparency we appreciate." "We wanted to handle this correctly," Victoria said. "Adrian's promotion was based entirely on merit, but we're aware of how it might appear given our personal involvement." "When did the personal relationship begin?" Adrian and Victoria exchanged glances, trying to determine the exact moment their professional boundaries had dissolved. "It's complicated," Adrian admitted. "We had a work emergency about 6 weeks ago that led to extended personal conversations. The attraction developed gradually, but we didn't act on it until after I'd already accepted the promotion." "And you're certain the promotion wasn't influenced by personal feelings?" "Absolutely certain." Victoria's voice was firm. "I offered Adrian the position because our technology infrastructure needs his expertise. The fact that we subsequently developed feelings for each other doesn't change his qualifications or the company's needs." Helen made notes on her tablet, her expression neutral. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we document this conversation and your disclosure. Second, we establish clear oversight. Victoria, you'll no longer be Adrian's direct supervisor for performance reviews or compensation decisions. Those will go through Robert Chen instead." Adrian felt his stomach drop. Robert, who'd openly questioned his qualifications during the budget meeting. Robert, who clearly resented his rapid promotion. "I understand the necessity," Victoria said carefully. "But Robert and Adrian have a contentious history. Is there another option?" "Robert is the CFO and oversees multiple departments. He's the appropriate choice for maintaining professional separation." Helen looked at Adrian directly. "I know you two had a rocky start, but Robert's job is to evaluate performance objectively. If you do good work, he'll recognize it. If you don't, well, that's a separate issue." "Understood," Adrian said, though the word tasted bitter. "Third," Helen continued, "you both need to maintain strict professional boundaries at work. No public displays of affection, no special treatment, no situations that could be interpreted as favoritism. Your personal relationship stays personal. At work, you're colleagues, period." They both nodded. "And finally, we revisit this in 6 months. If the relationship ends badly and it affects workplace dynamics, we'll need to make adjustments. That might mean reassigning Adrian to a different department or restructuring reporting lines." "That's fair," Victoria agreed. After they left Helen's office, Adrian and Victoria stood in the hallway, careful to maintain appropriate distance. "That went better than I expected," Adrian said quietly. "Helen's good at her job. She knows workplace relationships happen. The key is managing them professionally." Victoria glanced at her watch. "I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Dinner Wednesday night? We could try that Italian place you mentioned." "Sounds perfect." They separated, heading to different floors, and Adrian tried to ignore the eyes that followed him as he walked to his office. The gossip had already started. He'd heard the whispers in the break room, seen the speculative looks. People knew something was happening, even if they didn't have details yet. His team was waiting in the conference room for their weekly planning meeting. 15 faces turned toward him as he entered, and Adrian caught the barely concealed curiosity in their expressions. "Morning, everyone," he said, pulling up the project timeline on the screen. Let's start with Phase 1 implementation. Martinez, how's the security audit going? Jennifer Martinez, a senior network administrator who'd been with the company for 8 years, cleared her throat. Going well. We've identified 12 critical vulnerabilities, all of which are being addressed according to schedule. Excellent. Chen, any issues with the firewall upgrades? David Chen, no relation to Robert, shook his head. Minor delays with the vendor, but nothing that affects our timeline. The meeting proceeded smoothly, everyone reporting progress and raising concerns in a professional manner. But Adrian could feel the unasked questions hovering beneath the surface. When they finished an hour later, Jennifer lingered behind as the others filed out. Can I speak with you privately? She asked. Adrian's stomach tightened. Jennifer was respected, competent, and notoriously direct. Whatever she wanted to say, it wasn't going to be gentle. Of course, close the door. She did, then turned to face him with her arms crossed. There's talk about you and Ms. Hale. I'm aware. Is it true? Adrian considered deflecting, but Jennifer deserved honesty. She was his second in command, the person who'd be managing the team when he wasn't available. We're seeing each other. We disclosed it to HR this morning. Everything's being handled through proper channels. Jennifer absorbed this information, her expression unreadable. I'm going to be blunt. A lot of people think you got this promotion because you're sleeping with the boss. The words landed like a punch, even though Adrian had been expecting them. I earned this position based on my qualifications and performance, he said evenly. The relationship developed after I accepted the job, not before. I believe you, but not everyone will. Jennifer's tone softened slightly. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to prepare you for what you're walking into. Office relationships are complicated, and when one person has power over the other, people make assumptions. What would you do if you were in my position? Jennifer considered the question seriously. I'd work twice as hard as everyone else. I'd make sure every decision I made was beyond reproach. I'd prove, through consistent excellence, that I deserved to be here. She paused. And I'd accept that some people will never believe it, no matter how good you are. That's not particularly encouraging. No, but it's honest. Jennifer headed for the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I think you're qualified for this role. You've already made improvements in 3 weeks that we couldn't implement in 3 years. Just don't let the relationship overshadow the work. After she left, Adrian sat alone in the conference room, feeling the weight of her words. He'd known this would be difficult, but knowing it intellectually and living it were two different things. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. How's your morning going? Complicated, just had the people think I slept my way into this job conversation with my second in command. I'm sorry, that's unfair and inaccurate. Doesn't make it less real. No, it doesn't, but Adrian, you're brilliant at what you do. The results will speak for themselves. He wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that excellence would overcome gossip and assumptions. But he'd spent enough time in corporate environments to know that perception often mattered more than reality. Wednesday evening arrived with Adrian simultaneously looking forward to and dreading dinner with Victoria. He wanted to see her, wanted the easy conversation and connection they'd found. But he was also exhausted from 3 days of whispers and skeptical looks. They met at a small Italian restaurant in a neighboring town, far enough from their usual haunts that they were unlikely to run into colleagues. Victoria was already seated when Adrian arrived, looking tired but pleased to see him. Rough week? She asked as he sat down. You could say that. Apparently being the subject of office gossip is even less fun than I imagined. I've been fielding questions too, mostly variations of, are you crazy? And what were you thinking? What do you tell them? That my personal life is personal, and that your job performance will be evaluated by the same standards as everyone else's. Victoria reached across the table, stopping just short of taking his hand in the public restaurant. This is harder than I expected, seeing you at work but having to maintain complete professional distance. Welcome to my world. Do you know how difficult it is to sit in meetings with you and pretend I'm not constantly aware of everything about you? The way you tap your pen when you're thinking, how you tilt your head when someone's saying something you disagree with but you're being polite about it. You notice all that? I notice everything about you. It's becoming a problem. Victoria smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. We should probably talk about Leo. About when it's appropriate for him to know we're dating. The question sobered Adrian immediately. I've been thinking about that. He's 5. He doesn't really understand adult relationships beyond dad's friend, but he's also perceptive. If you start coming around more, he'll notice. What does your gut tell you? Adrian thought about Leo's endless curiosity, his innocent questions about why Dad was suddenly getting dressed up for dinners. I think we tell him something simple and honest, that you're someone I care about, someone I enjoy spending time with. We don't overwhelm him with details, but we don't lie either. And if he asks if you love me? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. They'd been dating for less than 2 weeks. Love was premature, wasn't it? Except Adrian had felt the pull toward Victoria since that first night in her office, and every conversation since had only strengthened it. I'd tell him the truth, Adrian said quietly, that I'm starting to care about you very much, that I don't know exactly what this is yet, but I want to find out. Victoria's eyes were bright in the dim restaurant lighting. I'd want you to tell him that too. They ordered food and spent the next hour talking about safer topics. Leo's school play, Victoria's upcoming business trip to Seattle, a documentary about Mars exploration they both wanted to watch. But underneath the casual conversation, Adrian felt the current of something deeper, the acknowledgement that they were building towards something significant. After dinner, they walked through the small downtown area, maintaining a careful distance that anyone observing would consider friendly rather than romantic. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching under their feet. I wish we could be normal, Victoria said suddenly. Go on dates without calculating who might see us. Hold hands without worrying about HR policies. We could quit our jobs and open a coffee shop, Adrian suggested. Serve overpriced lattes and debate whether to get a cat or a dog. You'd want to quit technology? No, but the fantasy is nice, a simpler life where we're not navigating corporate politics and power dynamics. Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him. They were on a quiet side street, no one else around. Adrian, this is complicated and messy and probably inadvisable from every practical standpoint, but I don't regret it. Do you? Not for a second. She kissed him then, quick and soft, a momentary breaking of their self-imposed rules. When she pulled back, she was smiling. That was wildly inappropriate given our conversation with HR, she said, completely unprofessional. We should probably head back before I do it again. They returned to their cars, the kiss lingering like a promise. Adrian drove home with his mind full of Victoria, her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at him like he was someone worth seeing. Rachel called as he was getting ready for bed, her timing impeccable as always. So the whole office knows you're dating your boss, she said without preamble. News travels fast. Marcus mentioned it. He's worried about you. Says people are being cruel. People are being people. Making assumptions, spreading rumors, generally acting like we're the most scandalous thing to happen since the company Christmas party where someone allegedly photocopied inappropriate body parts. Did that actually happen? According to legend, yes. I wasn't here yet, but Jennifer assures me it's true. Rachel laughed, then grew serious. How are you really doing with all this? The gossip, the scrutiny, the pressure. Adrian sat on the edge of his bed, suddenly exhausted. Honestly, some days I wonder if it's worth it. If I should just end things with Victoria and go back to being invisible basement IT guy. But you won't. No. Because when I'm with her, everything else fades. The gossip, the stress, the fear that I'm going to fail at this job. None of it matters as much as the way she makes me feel seen and understood. That's either beautiful or codependent. I'm not sure which. Can it be both? Probably. Rachel paused. Have you told her you love her yet? We've been dating 2 weeks. That's not what I asked. Adrian lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. No, but I think I'm getting there, which terrifies me because the last time I loved someone, I lost her. What if I let myself love Victoria and the universe decides to take her too? Adrian, Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. You can't live your life afraid of loss. Yes, Sarah died. Yes, it was terrible and unfair and something you'll carry forever. But you can't let that fear stop you from loving again. Easy for you to say. You didn't watch your spouse die in a hospital room. No, But I watched my brother turn into a ghost for 2 years. I watched you go through the motions while your heart stayed locked away. And now I'm watching you come back to life, and it's terrifying and wonderful in equal measure." After they hung up, Adrian checked on Leo, who was sleeping peacefully with Jeffrey the giraffe clutched in one arm and a library book about reptiles in the other. His son's face was peaceful, innocent, completely unaware of the complicated adult situations unfolding around him. Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Thank you for tonight, for being patient with this mess we've created, for making it feel worth the complications. Always," he wrote back. "Sleep well. You too. Dream about something impossible." Adrian smiled into the darkness, wondering what impossible dreams might look like. 2 months ago, he'd been a basement IT specialist going through the motions of survival. Now he was a director leading major infrastructure changes while dating a woman who challenged and inspired him in equal measure. Impossible dreams, it turned out, sometimes came true. The next Saturday, Victoria came to Leo's soccer game. She texted Adrian that morning asking if it would be okay, making it clear she'd understand if he wasn't ready for that step. But Adrian had said yes, partly because Leo had been asking about Dad's friend from the grocery store, and partly because he wanted to share this part of his life with her. Victoria arrived wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair in a ponytail, looking nothing like the executive who commanded boardrooms. Marcus spotted her immediately and elbowed Adrian in the ribs. "Bold move bringing your girlfriend to a kid's soccer game. She's interested in Leo's life. That matters to me." "Fair enough. Just prepare yourself for every parent here to suddenly become very interested in your personal business." Marcus wasn't wrong. Adrian felt the stares as Victoria made her way to the bleachers, the whispered conversations that stopped when she got close enough to hear, but she handled it with grace, settling beside Adrian and focusing entirely on the game. "Which one is Leo?" she asked, even though Adrian had shown her pictures. "Number 7. Currently trying to tie his shoe while the ball rolls past him." Victoria laughed as Leo finally looked up, noticed the ball was nowhere near him, and sprinted enthusiastically in the wrong direction. "He's got spirit. He's got something. Coordination isn't quite it yet." They watched the game together, Victoria asking genuine questions about the rules and the other kids, Adrian explaining the complex social dynamics of kindergarten soccer. When Leo scored a goal, largely by accident, running into the ball while it was already heading toward the net, Victoria cheered as loudly as any parent there. After the game, Leo ran over, grass-stained and glowing with pride. "Did you see my goal?" he demanded. "I did! That was amazing!" Victoria crouched down to his level. "You're a natural athlete." "I know. Coach Martinez said I have good energy." Leo noticed Marcus's daughter approaching. "Oh, this is my friend Maya. Maya, this is Ms. Hale. She's my dad's friend, and she likes lizards." Maya, who inherited her father's directness, looked between Victoria and Adrian with 6-year-old shrewdness. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" she asked Victoria. Adrian felt his face flush, but Victoria didn't miss a beat. "I'm your dad's friend who he likes spending time with," she said carefully. "Is that okay with you?" Leo considered this seriously. "Do you make him happy?" "I try to." "Then it's okay. He doesn't smile much usually, but he's been smiling more lately." Leo grabbed Maya's hand. "Come on, Coach brought popsicles." They ran off, leaving Adrian and Victoria standing awkwardly together while every parent within earshot pretended not to be listening. "That was smooth," Adrian murmured. "The lizard comment was a nice touch." "I meant what I said. Is it okay with him, me being here?" "I think so. He's been asking about you, wondering when you'd come over, if you wanted to see his rock collection, if you knew any good jokes about dinosaurs." "Do I need to know jokes about dinosaurs?" "It would help your standing considerably." Victoria smiled, then noticed the other parents watching. "Should I go? I don't want to make things more complicated for you." "Stay, please. I want you here." So she stayed, and they watched Leo devour a red popsicle while explaining something elaborate to Maya involving pirates and the monkey bars. Marcus came over with coffee from his eternally full thermos. "Victoria, right? I'm Marcus. Adrian's mentioned you." "Has he?" Victoria accepted the coffee with a grateful smile. "Oh yes, usually right around midnight when he texts me existential questions about workplace relationships and parenting and whether he's making catastrophic life choices." "Marcus," Adrian warned. I'm just saying you're clearly important enough to warrant the 3 a.m. panic text treatment. That's basically a declaration of love in Adrian's emotional vocabulary. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I'll take that as a compliment. They talked easily for the next 20 minutes, Marcus telling embarrassing stories about Adrian's early days as a single father, Victoria sharing carefully edited anecdotes about office dynamics. Adrian watched them interact, feeling something settle in his chest. This was what he wanted. Victoria integrated into his life, comfortable with his friends, interested in his son, not trying to replace Sarah or erase the past, but creating space for something new. Later that afternoon, after they'd left the soccer field, Victoria followed Adrian and Leo back to their house. It was a modest 2-bedroom in an older neighborhood, nothing like her modern mansion. Adrian felt suddenly self-conscious about the toys scattered across the living room, the crayon drawings covering the refrigerator, the general chaos of life with a 5-year-old. But Victoria looked around with genuine interest, examining Leo's artwork and asking questions about his favorite drawings. This one is a dragon, Leo explained, pointing to what looked like a purple blob with wings. And this is our house. And this is Dad. And this was going to be Mom, but she's not here anymore, so I made it a dog instead. Can we get a dog, Dad? Adrian's throat tightened. We've talked about this, buddy. Dogs are a big responsibility. But you said we'd think about it. And you always say thinking about it means no. Leo, what if we got a really small dog? Or a medium dog? Or we could share a dog with Maya's family. Victoria caught Adrian's eye, her expression understanding. Leo, can I tell you something? What? When I was your age, I wanted a horse. I asked my dad every single day for 3 years. Know what he said? No? He said we'd get a horse when I could prove I was responsible enough to take care of one. So I started doing chores without being asked. I kept my room clean, I helped with my little sister, I showed him I could handle responsibility. And did you get a horse? Eventually, yes. It took 2 years of proving myself, but I got my horse. Her name was Starlight. Leo's eyes went wide. Really? Really? So maybe instead of asking for a dog every day, you could show your dad you're ready for one. Help with chores, take care of your toys, be responsible with the things you already have. Leo considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay, I can do that. Dad, I'm going to be so responsible you won't believe it. He ran off to his room, presumably to begin his responsibility campaign, leaving Adrian and Victoria alone in the kitchen. That was brilliant, Adrian said. Thank you. I just redirected the energy. You'll probably regret it when he actually does become responsible enough for a dog. I'll deal with that problem when it comes. Adrian moved closer, keeping his voice low so Leo wouldn't overhear. You're really good with him. He's easy to be good with. He's sweet and funny and completely honest about what he's thinking. He likes you. Asked me this morning if you were coming to live with us. Victoria's eyes widened. And what did you tell him? That it's too soon for that conversation, but that you're someone important to me, someone I hope will be around for a long time. Is that what you want? Me around for a long time? Adrian reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. Yeah, it is. They stood together in his small kitchen, surrounded by evidence of the life he'd built from grief and determination. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Adrian could picture a future that wasn't just about survival, a future that included laughter and connection and the possibility of love. Leo came running back with a notebook and a very serious expression. I made a responsibility chart, he announced, showing them a paper covered in crooked lines and misspelled words. See? I'm going to clean my room every day and help with dishes and practice reading and not complain about vegetables. That's very impressive, Victoria said solemnly. When I do all these things, can we talk about the dog? Adrian exchanged a glance with Victoria, seeing the amusement in her eyes. When you've done all those things consistently for 3 months, we'll talk about it, he agreed. 3 months? That's forever. That's how long it takes to prove you're serious. Leo huffed dramatically but accepted the terms, running off to start his responsibility campaign immediately. Victoria laughed quietly. You know he's actually going to do it, right? And then you'll have to get a dog. I know, but 3 months from now, if he's actually kept up with that chart, he'll deserve a dog. Adrian looked at Victoria seriously. Will you still be around in 3 months? I hope so, if you'll have me. Always. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, Victoria helping Leo with his reading practice, the three of them making dinner in Adrian's small kitchen, watching an animated movie about talking fish while Leo provided running commentary on every scene. It was ordinary and domestic and absolutely perfect. When Victoria finally left that evening, Leo hugged her goodbye without prompting. "You should come over more," he said. "You're fun, and you believe in my responsibility." "I definitely believe in your responsibility," Victoria agreed, ruffling his hair. "Keep up with that chart, okay?" After she drove away, Adrian and Leo went through their bedtime routine: bath, pajamas, stories, the careful ritual they developed over 2 years of just the two of them. "Dad?" Leo asked as Adrian was tucking him in. "Do you love Ms. Hale?" Adrian's breath caught. "What makes you ask that?" "You smile when you talk about her, like how you smile in the pictures with Mom." Adrian sat on the edge of Leo's bed, choosing his words carefully. "I care about her very much. Love is a big word, and I want to be sure before I use it. Does that make sense?" "I guess." Leo hugged Jeffrey the giraffe. "I think Mom would like her. Miss Hale is nice and she doesn't treat me like a baby." "You're right. I think Mom would like her too." "Is it okay if I like her, even though she's not Mom?" Adrian's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "Of course it's okay. You can like whoever you want. Liking Ms. Hale doesn't mean you're forgetting Mom or loving her any less." "Okay, good." Leo yawned. "I'm glad you have a friend who makes you smile." After Leo fell asleep, Adrian sat in his living room with the lights off, thinking about his son's words. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped just surviving and started actually living again. Had started imagining a future that included more than just him and Leo navigating the world alone. His phone buzzed with the text from Victoria. "Thank you for today, for letting me into your life, for trusting me with Leo. It meant everything." Adrian typed back, "Thank you for being someone worth trusting, for seeing us, both of us, and not running away." "Never. You're stuck with me now." "Good," Adrian wrote, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "That's exactly where I want you." 3 months passed faster than Adrian expected, measured in Leo's responsibility chart checkmarks and the gradual integration of Victoria into their daily lives. The office gossip never fully disappeared, but it faded into background noise as Adrian's infrastructure overhaul produced undeniable results. System downtime dropped by 60%. Security incidents fell to nearly zero. Even Robert Chen, during Adrian's first official performance review, grudgingly admitted that the technology improvements were exceeding projections. "Your work is solid," Robert said, his tone suggesting the words cost him something. "The team respects you. The metrics are good." "But," Adrian prompted, hearing the unspoken criticism, "but you're still dating the CEO, and that still makes people uncomfortable, no matter how good your work is." Robert leaned back in his chair. "I'm not saying it's fair, I'm saying it's reality. You're going to be scrutinized more heavily than anyone else in your position. Every decision will be questioned. Every success will be attributed to favoritism." "I understand that." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're making your life exponentially harder by maintaining this relationship. Is she really worth all this complication?" Adrian thought about Victoria reading bedtime stories to Leo in funny voices, about her texts at midnight checking if he'd remembered to eat dinner, about the way she looked at him like he was someone extraordinary rather than just competent. "Yes," he said simply. "She is." Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Just make sure the work stays excellent. That's your only real defense against the criticism." The conversation stayed with Adrian through the following weeks. He worked harder than ever, arriving early and staying late when Leo was with Rachel or Marcus. He documented every decision, justified every budget allocation, made himself beyond reproach, and slowly, grudgingly, the skepticism began to shift. Jennifer pulled him aside one afternoon in early December, her expression thoughtful. "You know what the team is saying about you now?" she asked. Adrian braced himself. "What?" "That you're the first director in years who actually understands the work we do. That you fight for our resources and defend our value to the company." She smiled slightly. "You've won them over. Not all of them, but most. The work speaks for itself." "Thank you. That means a lot." "Don't thank me. You earned it." Jennifer paused. For what it's worth, I think Victoria Hale is lucky to have you. Not because you're good at your job, but because you're a good person. Those are harder to find. That evening, Adrian picked up Leo from school and found his son practically vibrating with excitement. Dad! Dad! Guess what? What, buddy? I did my responsibility chart for 3 whole months, every single day. Miss Rodriguez said she's never seen a kindergartner so committed to anything. Adrian's chest tightened. He'd been hoping Leo would forget about the dog, or at least lose interest. But his son had taken the challenge seriously, documenting every completed task with the dedication of someone twice his age. You did. I'm really proud of you. So can we get a dog now? You promised. I said we'd talk about it. That's not the same as promising. Leo's face fell, and Adrian felt like the worst parent in the world. But, he continued quickly, you kept your end of the agreement. So yes, we can start looking at dogs. Small dogs. Calm dogs. Dogs that don't eat furniture or destroy the house. Leo's shriek of joy was probably audible 3 blocks away. He launched himself at Adrian, hugging him so tightly that Adrian nearly dropped his work bag. Can we tell Ms. Hale? She's the one who said I should do the responsibility chart. We can tell her at dinner tonight. She's coming over, remember? Victoria had been joining them for dinner twice a week, a routine that had developed naturally over the past months. Sometimes she cooked, sometimes Adrian did, sometimes they ordered pizza, and Leo declared it a special occasion. The 3 of them had found a rhythm that felt comfortable, almost like a family. When Victoria arrived that evening, Leo met her at the door with the news before she'd even taken off her coat. We're getting a dog, a real one. Dad said yes. Victoria looked at Adrian over Leo's head, her eyes dancing with amusement. Did he now? The kid earned it, Adrian said, surrendering to the inevitable. 3 months of perfect responsibility. I couldn't say no. That's wonderful, Leo. Have you thought about what kind of dog you want? A golden retriever, like the one in that movie we watched. They're big and friendly and really smart. Golden retrievers are also enormous and need lots of exercise, Adrian pointed out. I'll walk it every day. I'll play with it and teach it tricks and everything. Victoria caught Adrian's eye, and they shared a moment of silent communication that had become second nature over the past months. This was going to be chaos, but it was the kind of chaos that came from keeping promises and watching a child's dreams come true. Over dinner, spaghetti that Leo insisted on twirling incorrectly despite multiple demonstrations, Victoria asked about their timeline. When are you planning to start looking? This weekend, I guess. There's a shelter about 20 minutes from here. Can I come? The question came out tentative, as if Victoria wasn't sure she had the right to insert herself into this family decision. Leo answered before Adrian could. Yes, you have to come. You're the one who said I should prove I was responsible. Adrian met Victoria's eyes across the table. They'd been together for 4 months now, but they hadn't yet defined what she was to them, what role she played in their lives. She wasn't Leo's mother and never would be, but she was clearly more than just Dad's girlfriend. We'd love to have you there, Adrian said. If you're free Saturday morning, I'll make myself free. Saturday arrived cold and bright, the first real hint of winter in the air. Adrian, Victoria, and Leo drove to the Riverside Animal Shelter, Leo bouncing in his booster seat with excitement. What if they don't have any dogs, he worried. Then we'll try a different shelter, Adrian assured him. We'll find the right dog, buddy, I promise. The shelter was crowded with families looking for pets, volunteers in matching blue shirts guiding people through rows of kennels. The sound of barking echoed off concrete walls, dozens of dogs all hoping to catch someone's attention. Leo walked slowly past each kennel, studying every dog with serious concentration. Victoria stayed close to him, occasionally reading out names and descriptions when Leo couldn't quite make out the handwriting. They'd nearly reached the end of the kennels when Leo stopped abruptly. This one, he said, pointing. Adrian looked into the kennel and saw a medium-sized golden retriever mix, maybe 2 years old, watching them with gentle brown eyes. The card on the kennel identified her as Rosie, surrendered by her previous owners when they moved overseas. She's perfect, Leo breathed. A volunteer appeared beside them, smiling. You have good taste. Rosie's been here for 3 weeks. She's great with kids, house-trained, knows basic commands. She's calm for a retriever mix, which is unusual. Someone put a lot of work into training her before they had to give her up. Can we meet her? Leo asked. The volunteer led them to a small room where Rosie was brought in on a leash. She sat politely when commanded, then approached Leo slowly, as if sensing his excitement and trying not to overwhelm him. Leo giggled as she licked his hand, and the sound made Adrian's chest ache with happiness. "What do you think?" Adrian asked Victoria quietly, while Leo was rolling on the floor with Rosie. "I think she's perfect, and I think Leo's already in love." That was fast. Sometimes it happens that way. You just know. Victoria looked at him meaningfully, and Adrian understood they weren't just talking about the dog anymore. They left the shelter an hour later with adoption papers, a scheduled pickup time for the following day, and Leo talking nonstop about everything he was going to teach Rosie. "Can Ms. Hale help us get supplies?" Leo asked from the back seat. "She knows about taking care of animals because she had a horse." "If she wants to," Adrian said, glancing at Victoria. "I'd love to help," Victoria said warmly. "Every new dog needs a proper welcome." They spent the afternoon at a pet store, Leo selecting everything with the gravity of someone making life or death decisions. Victoria proved unexpectedly knowledgeable about dog care, steering them toward practical choices while still letting Leo pick out one ridiculous toy, a plush dinosaur that squeaked when squeezed. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Adrian and Victoria sat on his back porch with mugs of tea, watching the stars appear above the quiet neighborhood. "Thank you," Adrian said, "for today, for being part of this. I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else." Victoria shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "He's a special kid, Adrian. You're doing an amazing job with him." "I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Well, that's what good parenting looks like. Doing your best even when you're terrified you're getting it wrong. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Adrian felt the rightness of the moment settle into his bones. This was what he wanted. This warmth, this companionship, this sense of building something meaningful. "I love you," he said quietly, the words escaping before he could overthink them. Victoria lifted her head to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "What?" "I love you. I've been trying to find the right moment to say it, but I don't think there is a perfect moment. So I'm just saying it now, on my back porch on a random Saturday night. I love you, Victoria." Her smile was radiant. "I love you too. I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it first, afraid it was too soon or too much or that I'd scare you away." "You couldn't scare me away if you tried." Victoria kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was still smiling. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we keep doing what we're doing, taking it one day at a time, figuring things out as we go." "That's not much of a plan?" "No, but it's honest, and it's ours." The following day, they picked up Rosie from the shelter, and Leo's joy was so pure it brought tears to Adrian's eyes. The dog settled into their home as if she'd always been there, curling up on the rug in Leo's room at night and following him around the house during the day. Victoria started spending more time at their house, her presence becoming as natural as the furniture. She had a drawer in Adrian's dresser now, a toothbrush in the bathroom, opinions about which grocery store had better produce. And Leo had stopped calling her Miss Hale, shifting to just Victoria with the easy acceptance of a child who'd never known a time when she wasn't part of their lives. At work, the infrastructure overhaul completed ahead of schedule and under budget. The board gave Adrian's team a commendation, and even the most skeptical executives had to acknowledge the transformation he'd led. Robert Chen, in a moment of surprising honesty, told Adrian he'd underestimated him. "You proved me wrong," Robert said. "That doesn't happen often. Well done." The real test came in February when Victoria had to travel to Singapore for 2 weeks of meetings with international partners. She'd made the trip annually for the past 5 years, but this time she hesitated. "I could send someone else," she said over dinner at her house, where Adrian and Leo had started spending weekends. "Robert or Jennifer from marketing. It doesn't have to be me." "Yes, it does," Adrian countered. "This is your company. These are your relationships. You can't start delegating critical responsibilities just because we're dating." "But I'll miss Valentine's Day and Leo's birthday party." "We'll celebrate when you get back. Leo understands that you have important work." Victoria looked uncertain, which was unusual for her. Adrian realized she was struggling with the same balance he'd wrestled with for years: career versus personal life, ambition versus presence. "Go," he said gently. "Do your job brilliantly, the way you always do. We'll be here when you get back. She went, and the 2 weeks felt longer than they should have. But they video called every day, Victoria joining Leo's bedtime routine from 12 time zones away. And when she finally returned, exhausted and jet-lagged, Leo crashed into her with a hug that nearly knocked her over. I missed you, he declared. Rosie missed you too. She kept sleeping on your side of Dad's bed. Victoria looked at Adrian over Leo's head, her expression soft with emotion. My side of the bed? Apparently, Adrian said, not quite able to hide his smile. Rosie's decided you're part of the pack. That night, after Leo was asleep and they were alone, Victoria brought it up again. He said Dad's bed, like it's our bed, like I belong there. You do belong there, if you want to. Adrian, are you asking me to move in? He hadn't been exactly, but hearing her say it out loud, he realized it was exactly what he wanted. Not officially, not yet, but maybe we could start talking about it? About what it would look like if we combined our lives more intentionally. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I have a house, a big, empty house that I bought to prove something to people who don't matter. And you have a home, a real one, full of love and laughter and a 5-year-old who leaves Legos everywhere. Is there a question in there somewhere? What if I sold my house, found something smaller, or we looked for a place together? Something that could be ours rather than mine or yours? Adrian's heart was racing. This was huge, terrifying, wonderful. You'd do that? Give up your mansion? It's not a home, Adrian. It's just a house. You taught me the difference. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. I want what you have, what you and Leo have built. I want to be part of it, officially and permanently. Leo would lose his mind with excitement. He's been asking when you're going to stay forever. And what about you? What do you want? Adrian pulled her close, feeling the rightness of her in his arms. I want mornings with you and Leo fighting over who gets the last waffle. I want to come home to you reading stories in terrible character voices. I want everything, Victoria. All of it. They started looking at houses the following month, searching for something that could accommodate their merged lives. It needed to be big enough for Leo to have his own space, for Adrian to have a home office, for Victoria to have room for the life she was building outside of work. They looked at a dozen properties before finding the right one, a 4-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood with good schools and a big backyard for Rosie. Leo approved it immediately based on the fact that his room had a window seat perfect for reading and there was a tree in the backyard suitable for a future treehouse. This is it, he declared with absolute certainty. This is our house. They closed on the property in April, and moving day was controlled chaos. Marcus and his family helped, along with Rachel and her kids. Even some of Adrian's team from work volunteered, turning the process into a community effort. Victoria's sister came too, bringing her 3 children and enough energy to power a small city. She pulled Adrian aside while everyone else was carrying boxes. I haven't seen Victoria this happy in years, she said. Maybe ever. Thank you for that. I didn't do anything special. You saw her, not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, not the woman who inherited a company and spent 15 years proving she deserved it. You saw Victoria, and you loved her anyway. That night, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and exhausted from a day of manual labor, the 3 of them sat on the floor of their new living room eating pizza straight from the box. This is a good house, Leo announced through a mouthful of pepperoni. It feels right. It does, Victoria agreed, meeting Adrian's eyes over Leo's head. They fell into new routines in the new house. Victoria reduced her hours at work, delegating more and trusting her team to handle things she'd previously micromanaged. Adrian structured his schedule around Leo's school events and activities, but also around date nights with Victoria and quiet mornings before everyone woke up. On Leo's 6th birthday, they threw a party in their big backyard with his entire kindergarten class. Victoria helped organize games while Adrian manned the grill, and Rosie supervised everything with the patient tolerance of a dog who'd learned that small humans dropped food with regularity. Sarah's parents came too, and Adrian watched nervously as Victoria met them for the first time. But Leo's grandmother hugged Victoria warmly and thanked her for making her grandson smile again. Sarah would have liked you, she said simply. She always said Adrian needed someone who could keep up with him intellectually, someone who wouldn't let him hide when things got hard. That night, After the party cleanup and Leo was asleep upstairs, Adrian and Victoria sat on their back porch, a ritual they'd transplanted from the old house to the new one. "Your mother-in-law is terrifying," Victoria said, "but in a good way. She liked you. That's saying something. She's very protective of Leo." "I don't want to replace Sarah. You know that, right? I'm not trying to erase her or pretend she didn't exist." "I know, and that's exactly why this works." Adrian reached for her hand. "You honor Sarah's memory by loving Leo and making our life better. That's not replacement. That's addition." They'd kept photos of Sarah throughout the house, made sure Leo knew his mother's stories, visited her grave on important days. Victoria never flinched from any of it, understanding that loving Adrian meant accepting all of him, including the parts that would always belong to Sarah. In June, Adrian's infrastructure project won an industry award for innovation and implementation. He had to give a speech at a conference in front of 300 technology professionals, and Victoria sat in the front row beaming with pride. "You were amazing," she said afterward at the reception. "I was terrified. Public speaking is worse than emergency system crashes." "You couldn't tell. You sounded confident and knowledgeable, and like someone who absolutely deserved that award." Robert Chen appeared beside them, his expression almost friendly. "Congratulations, Adrian. The company is getting national recognition because of your work. That's significant." "Thank you. It was a team effort." "Yes, but you led the team. That matters." Robert glanced at Victoria. "I owe you both an apology. I was skeptical about this relationship, thought it would compromise Adrian's work or create problems for the company. I was wrong. You've both handled it with remarkable professionalism." After Robert left, Victoria squeezed Adrian's hand. "We did it," she said quietly. "We proved it could work. We're still proving it, every day." "True, but I think we're past the hardest part. Now we just get to enjoy what we've built." On a Sunday morning in late July, Adrian woke to find Victoria already up, sitting on the edge of their bed watching Leo and Rosie play in the backyard. The morning light made her hair shine, and Adrian felt a surge of gratitude so intense it was almost painful. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How different my life is now. A year ago, I was working 70-hour weeks, eating takeout at my desk, convinced I didn't have time for relationships or family or anything beyond the company. And now? Now I have you and Leo and a dog who thinks she's a lapdog despite being 50 pounds. I have family dinners and soccer games and a house that actually feels like a home." She turned to face him. "I have everything I didn't know I wanted." "Me too." Leo burst through the door at that moment, Rosie bounding after him. "Dad, Victoria! Rosie learned a new trick. Watch!" They watched as Leo commanded Rosie to sit, stay, and then shake hands with perfect execution. The dog looked ridiculously pleased with herself, tail wagging hard enough to create a breeze. "That's amazing, buddy," Adrian said. "You're a great teacher." "I know. I'm thinking maybe I want to be a dog trainer when I grow up, or maybe a scientist, or a professional soccer player." "You have time to decide," Victoria assured him. After Leo ran back outside with Rosie, Victoria looked at Adrian seriously. "I want to ask you something, and you can say no without any pressure or awkwardness." "Okay?" "I want to adopt Leo, legally, not to replace Sarah or take away from what you two have built, but to make it official that I'm his parent too, that I'm committed to him for the long term, not just as your girlfriend, but as someone who loves him independently." Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. "Victoria, I know it's a big ask, and I know it's complicated emotionally, but I love him, Adrian, not because I love you, but because he's Leo, because he's brave and funny and kind, and being his parent would be the greatest honor of my life." "Yes," Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." They started the adoption process that fall, working through paperwork and legal requirements with the same methodical approach they brought to everything else. Leo was consulted and gave his enthusiastic approval, especially when he learned it meant Victoria would officially be his parent. "Does this mean I can call you Mom?" he asked Victoria one evening. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Only if you want to. You had a mom who loved you very much. I'm not trying to replace her." Leo considered this with his characteristic seriousness. "Can I have two moms? One who's in heaven And one who's here? I think that's perfect, Victoria managed, pulling him into a hug. The adoption was finalized in December, and they celebrated with a small party, just family and close friends. Leo got to sign the official papers with a special pen, his signature crooked but proud. That night, after everyone had left and Leo was asleep, Adrian found Victoria in their home office looking at the adoption certificate. No regrets? He asked. None. This is the best decision I've ever made. Better than taking over your father's company? That wasn't really a decision. It was an obligation. She gestured to encompass the house, their life together. This was a choice, and I'd make it again every single day. On New Year's Eve, they stayed home with Leo instead of attending the fancy party Victoria's company was hosting. They made popcorn and watched movies and let Leo stay up until midnight, which he made it to with impressive determination. As the countdown began, Adrian pulled Victoria close on their couch, while Leo excitedly counted down the seconds. This year, Adrian said quietly, I want to marry you. Officially, legally, in front of everyone who matters. Victoria's eyes widened. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intent. The actual proposal will be better planned. I don't need better planned. I just need you. Is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. They kissed as the clock struck midnight, and Leo shouted, Happy New Year! And set off a confetti popper that made Rosie bark in surprise. And Adrian thought about the night 18 months ago, when Victoria had called in a panic about her crashed computer, how that single emergency had set everything in motion. He'd driven to her house expecting to fix a technical problem and go home. Instead, he'd found something he didn't know he was looking for. A partner who challenged him, who loved his son, who saw past his grief to the person he could still become. They got married in their backyard in May, surrounded by flowers and friends and family. Leo served as ring bearer with Rosie as an unofficial flower dog, and both performed their duties with varying degrees of success. Sarah's parents were there, crying happy tears and telling Victoria how grateful they were that Adrian had found love again. Sarah would be so happy, Leo's grandmother said during the reception. She made Adrian promise not to stop living, and he kept that promise. Victoria's vows made Adrian cry, which embarrassed him until he saw most of the guests were crying too. You taught me that strength isn't about never needing help, she said, her voice steady despite her own tears. It's about being brave enough to accept it when it's offered. You taught me that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies. And you taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything crashes, because that's when we discover what we're really capable of building. Adrian's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought I understood partnership and commitment and building a life with someone. Then I lost it all and convinced myself I'd never find it again. You proved me wrong in the best possible way. You showed me that love doesn't replace love. It expands to make room for new possibilities. I'm grateful every day that your computer crashed and you called me for help, because fixing that system gave me back my life. They danced their first dance as a married couple to a song Leo had helped pick, and their son danced with them, standing on Adrian's feet while Rosie supervised from the sidelines. Later that night, after the guests had left and Leo was asleep upstairs, Adrian and Victoria sat on their back porch watching the stars, the same ritual they'd been keeping since that first weekend together. This is real, right? Victoria asked. I'm not going to wake up and discover I imagined all of it. It's real. We're real. Good. Because I plan to keep you forever. Forever sounds perfect. 5 years later, they added a daughter to their family, Emma, named after Victoria's grandmother. Leo took his role as big brother with absolute seriousness, teaching Emma everything he knew about responsibility and dogs and being brave even when you were scared. Adrian eventually became chief technology officer, a role Victoria created specifically for him that allowed him to shape the company's technology vision while maintaining work-life balance. Victoria herself stepped back from day-to-day operations when Emma was born, appointing a president to handle the routine management while she focused on strategic direction. They never forgot the night that started it all. The crashed computer, the emergency call, the unexpected conversation that had changed everything. And every year on the anniversary of that night, they stayed up late together, drinking coffee and talking until the early morning hours, remembering how it felt to discover each other. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't called you that night?" Victoria asked on their 8th anniversary. "If I'd tried to fix it myself or called someone else?" "Sometimes. But I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are inevitable." "You really believe that?" "I believe that the universe puts people in our path when we need them most. You needed someone who could fix your system. I needed someone who could help me rebuild mine. We found each other at exactly the right moment." Victoria rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sunrise together through their windows. Upstairs, Leo was probably already awake, reading books to Emma and explaining complicated concepts in the patient way he'd learned from having teachers who believed in him. Rosie would be curled up at the foot of their bed, gray now around her muzzle, but still devoted. This was the life they'd built from the wreckage of that first system crash, messy and imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. A life that honored the past while embracing the future, that made space for grief and joy in equal measure. Adrian thought about Sarah sometimes, about the promises he'd made in that hospital corridor. He'd kept them all. He'd stayed present for Leo, built a stable life, found happiness again. And he liked to think she was pleased with what he'd created, not because it erased what they'd had, but because it proved that love could survive even the most catastrophic losses. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, reading his contemplative silence. "That sometimes the most important systems crash at exactly the right time. Because when everything fails, you get to rebuild it better than it was before." "Are we still talking about computers?" "We're talking about life, about taking risks and accepting help and believing that something broken can become something beautiful." Victoria kissed him softly. "I love you. For fixing my computer and staying for coffee and seeing possibilities where I only saw problems. I love you too, for calling me that night, for trusting me with your vulnerabilities, for loving Leo and building this life with me." They sat together as morning light filled their home, listening to the sounds of their children waking up and Rosie's tail thumping against the floor. This was everything Adrian had lost and found again in different form: family, partnership, purpose, love. And it had all started with a crashed computer and a desperate phone call at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Sometimes, Adrian reflected, the best things in life came from the moments when everything fell apart, because that's when you discovered what you were really capable of building. Not just better systems, but better lives. Not just surviving, but truly, finally, completely living.